So, John, welcome. You're on with Eric and Matt.
Hey, happy Sunday. How are you?
I'm all right.
Doing okay?
Yeah, sorry. Just I had the phone down. I wasn't expecting to be on.
Now I get it.
So I wanted to tell you guys a little story. I grew up in a Catholic household and went to Catholic schools all during my upbringing. And, I was religious as a child, but when I was in my teenage years, I rejected it and I became an atheist. I ended up going to a state university, which obviously is totally secular institution, and I studied engineering there. And I went through some experiences as an atheist that caused me to be open to a spiritual point of view and to accept God. And the most easily relatable of those is that I started to find four-leaf clovers in a pattern that I would call statistically anomalous. And I now have a wallet with like over 100 of them. And I haven't looked for them. And so that seemed to be kind of what a religious person might call a sign. And so I haven't joined a church or anything, but I'm just open to a spiritual point of view. And I find that when I'm open to what feels like God in my life, when I explore that, even if I take a scientific approach to exploring it, it leads to positive results.
So,
And I
I have
haven't
one
really
question.
discussed this with anyone. Yeah, go ahead.
You're talking about what you perceive to be the statistical likelihood of four-leaf clovers. What are the odds of finding a four-leaf clover if you just had to guess?
Well, I've Googled it, and it usually comes up as around 1 in 10,000 clovers is a
A
four-leaf clover.
2017 study said it's a little closer to 1 in 5,000, but sure, 1 in 5,000 to 1 in 10,000. How many bits of
Okay.
clover do you think you've seen versus how many four-leaf clovers you've had? You've beaten those odds by how much?
Well, yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying. The thing that makes this meaningful to me is that I haven't actually looked for these. It's just kind of, I'll glance down and see one there.
Okay.
And so I started
So
to collect them. And
I don't know. Maybe Erika knows. If you live in a particular area, the clover that you're likely to run into could be just genetically predisposed to producing more four-leaf clovers, right?
yep.
But
hmm
So
but even if
it could be drift, right? Like you could have that, but then it also could be that for whatever reason in the area you live in, there's some kind of selective benefit to having four leaves. Right? Like you don't know that perhaps I would just to throw my hat in the ring on this one, right? Like it could very well be possible that the area that you live in is very predisposed to four-leaf clovers. I don't even think you need to appeal to that, right? I think that this is nothing more than like an attention survivorship bias, right? There's a word for it that's just not coming to my mind right now, right? When I was a kid, I saw that I would look up at the clock when I was trying to fall asleep when I was in like elementary school. And one day I looked at it and it said 9/11, right? And it was pretty close to when 9/11 had actually happened. I thought, oh man, what a horrible sign, right? That's awful. That's really bad luck. And then it seemed that for the next like 5 years of my life, every time I looked at the clock in the evening, it was 9/11. I don't think that that was actually what was going on, right? I think that what was
the clock
actually
would
was
be
going on.
420 all the time.
Yeah, see, yours is more fun than mine. But like what was actually going on is that 420 and 9/11 are very memorable numbers that show up on clocks. And so when you see them, they stick in your head, and you're like, God, how many? You don't think to yourself, when was the last time I saw 8:52 on the clock? Because that number doesn't mean anything. At least to me, it doesn't mean anything, right? A four-leaf clover is something that is widely appreciated to symbolize luck, right? It's widely appreciated in cultures here in the West to be related to things like good fortune. And so I don't think it's surprising that after the first clover you found, you were like, oh my God, a 4-leaf clover, what good luck. And then every time you saw a 4-leaf clover since then, you were like, holy crap, these are so many 4-leaf clovers. To me, without the actual numbers of like, and I know that you don't have those on hand, and that sucks, because I would actually be very interested, like how much are you beating these odds by here, right? But if I had to bet, I would bet that you're seeing a lot more clovers than the ones that you're picking up. And the fact that you're picking up all these 4-leaf clovers is nothing more than the fact that 4-leaf clovers are very memorable, and you take them or you appreciate them every time you see them. And it sort of created a very clear pattern in your mind, because humans are perhaps the best, if not the best, current pattern seekers on the planet. We see them wherever we go. We see them in wood grain. We see them in the clouds, right?
I want to make sure I give John a chance to respond, but the point that I was eventually going to get to is this. John, if I gave you the max benefit of the doubt, and you happen to find a 4-leaf clover literally every time you left the house, it didn't matter where you were going, at some point for every day for 365 days, at some point in every one of those days, you weren't out searching clover for 4-leaves, but every one of those days, 365 days in a row, you found a 4-leaf clover somewhere. What would be the best explanation for that? And how do you know that's the best explanation? Because to me, that doesn't get me to God or even in the ballpark.
Sure. Yeah. No, well, this is more like an experiential change for me. I think that a couple of the ideas that in my experience, personality development, that I tie into this and I use to inform how my perspective has changed, and I remain a rational person, are the Greek concept of logos, that there's like an organizing principle to the universe. And the other one is Jung's synchronicity, which I think is more directly relevant. That I think that if I was going to categorize this phenomenon in, a spiritual sphere of things, I would say it has strong, synchronistic qualities to it. That they're all this evokes an emotion that reminds me of the comfortable church community atmosphere where I grew up when I find a clover. So the explanation to me is like it's like a SETI, kind of like, oh, we got a beep, that kind of a thing. Like there may be something out there, and so in life I explore that. It's I was a very just really turned off, closed-minded atheist for a long time, and so I just wanted to share like the benefit of being open to where I find these signals that seem to be, meaningful in my life, wouldn't be meaningful to others. I'm not really pushing this, I don't expect you guys to change your point of view, but I just wanted to share it and discuss it because I don't really talk about this with many people.
Do you think that Erika or myself are opposed to the possibility of a God?
No, I don't think so. I haven't heard Erika on this show. I've heard you, Matt, a little bit. And the last caller, it sounded like you were open-minded to some of this, but this particular one, and here's another thing that kind of goes to this is I've talked to people that I grew up with in the same area who were beating the same streets, and they haven't found 4-leaf clovers. Not to say that this is like special or anything, because yeah, obviously there's always a perfectly rational, secular explanation for it, that it's just chance. But for me, it has made my life better just to be open to the possibility that there is a greater, deeper spiritual meaning to it.
I don't think that there's I don't
Go
think
ahead,
that
Jen.
there's particularly. I'm sorry for cutting you off there, Matt, but I don't think that there's particularly anything wrong. I mean, like Matt just said there, like we're both. I would consider myself. I won't speak for you, Matt, although I think this holds for you as well. I'm perfectly open to the possibility of a whole lot of things in my life, and I find that being open to these kinds of realities and being open to being convinced to them of them rather it enriches my life greatly, right? It's a part of being a curious person. I don't think that's a negative on your part at all. But I remain unconvinced, and I think the reason for that is because you keep an open mind, you keep an open curiosity, but you also try to keep a level head with this. And I think if you're getting a lot out of seeing these four-leaf clovers, that's cool. I think coming to the conclusion that you've come to on my end, I don't find that convincing. Now, if you've got some reason that you find this prevalency of four-leaf clover specifically to be compelling, I would be interested in hearing that. But you say other people aren't seeing them. I would wager, my granddad does a lot of carpentry. He's like really into carpentry and stuff like that. And when I visit his house, I look at the wood that he's got out, and a lot of times I see, like Sid the Sloth from Ice Age in the wood grain. And the reason is because that guy's got a face that's like two eyes and then a nose in the center. It's a really common pattern to see in wood grain. But someone who's never seen Ice Age isn't going to see Sid the Sloth in wood grain. They're not looking for that pattern. I think you're looking for this pattern. That's where I'm coming from on this. When I hear you say this, I hear you saying, when I see these four-leaf clovers, I get positive reinforcement. I feel great when I see these four-leaf clovers. I think you're looking for them. And I don't think, again, like that's not a bad thing. I just don't think that the conclusion that you're coming to is necessarily convincing to me.
I want to make sure you answer, and I'll have more to say afterwards, but also I just realized I don't remember the last time I found any clover, let alone a four-leaf clover. I know there's clover and different clover-like plants all over. And I even have people, whose ground cover, their grass has been replaced by others. I just don't ever bend down and pick them up at all. But I want to let you respond first, John, before I go into the next point.
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, yeah, if you don't believe that this just occurs and that I'm not looking for them, I don't want to argue about that. But if I had to kind of make an interpretation, I mean, if it was me on the other end of the cosmic ball and chain here, and I was the one sending these signals, this would be merely, I think, an eye-opening thing to kind of get somebody's attention, and and really from there I kind of said, okay, right, well, what if I just stop reacting to this particular phenomenon and just look for the same experiential qualities as I go about regular choices in life, and just think about, where do I see God in life now that I'm open to this? And will that help me make decisions that I can more easily live with? And it does. It helps me find comfort and peace, and it helps me form the relationships that I want to have.
That's all good stuff, except that it annoys the crap out of me because I don't understand any of it. I don't know what you mean by spiritual. I don't know. You said something like, if I had to come up with an explanation and I immediately said, do you have to? Wouldn't I don't know why this is happening make more sense? And then you mentioned, if you were on the other side of the cosmic ball and chain, if you were God, would you be making you or me or anybody else find four-leaf clovers at a slightly or greatly elevated rate as a way of sending a message to us?
I don't know. I make no claim to understand God, or
I asked what
whether
John,
it's
I asked
sentient.
I asked what you would do if you were God. I didn't say, what do you think God's doing? If you
Oh,
were
right. Okay.
God,
Well, yeah. I
if
mean,
you were God, would you send an increased picking up of four-leaf clovers as a message?
it depends on, is this whatsoever meaningful to the person finding them?
If you don't mind
Would
me
it?
asking, John, I really don't feel like obligated to answer this if this is prying, but is there something about four-leaf clovers for you in particular, outside of just like, oh, you saw them and you were like, that's really lucky? Like, do they have some kind of significance to you in your life outside of just like what they would be to like me or Matt here?
Oh yeah. Yep. My family is half Irish and went to a church called St. Patrick's, which has the clover. There's the story of the clover. Whether it's true or
So
not, I don't know.
so do you think that I was gonna make an example with the church that I went to growing up, but like let's say like do you think that if God is out there communicating with people and like someone went to like let's say I went to a church called like the Rising Dragon Church. Like do you think I would start seeing like dragons every not literal dragons, but like depictions of dragons everywhere? Like do you not think that maybe what's going on here is that because a clover means a lot to you, when you're passing over a clover patch, you look at the clovers. Clover means something to you historically. It's been something of comfort to you. So you look at it, like it draws your eye more than it would than like a dandelion would. If you went to the Church of the Dandelion, I think you would probably be looking at dandelions more than you would be at clovers. Like I guess what I'm asking here to kind of formulate it into something more coherent is what about this situation that you've experienced makes it more likely, in your opinion, to be supernatural rather than four-leaf clovers mean something to you, thus you pay attention to them, thus you look for four-leaf clovers more often, thus you find four-leaf clovers more often. Why isn't that a reasonable explanation to you?
Well, it could be that it seems like this is kind of like a two sides of the coin thing. Like I've
Right.
I've been on the side where I try to make other people's testimonies about their experiences with finding spirituality secular. But having been later, I went through that atheist period. But after having changed myself, I realized it's more about what happened during the experience, like what was going through my mind during this experience.
So, John, I want to make it clear, like, I'm not trying to, my goal here isn't to like poke holes in your experience to like denigrate it or something like that. But just, since you called in to like talk to a couple of skeptics, I think what Matt and I are both trying to do here is to say, okay, well, like, what about this situation from your perspective makes it necessary to you that it's supernatural, right? Like, I'm not trying to take anything away from you here. There are people in
Oh,
my
sure,
life who have
yeah.
had weird experiences, like I've got family members who I trust very greatly. I think they've got a level head on their shoulders. Like weird things, they talk about these weird things that have happened, like ghosts or something like that. Do I think that makes them, crazy, or that they saw a ghost? I don't think either of those things are true. I think that they can be a reasonable person and have had this experience, and that there's also potentially just like a pretty regular explanation for it. So I'm proposing it mostly to kind of say, okay, well, have you considered this? And if you have, why didn't you find it compelling?
I think it was, I think about it. I haven't done the numbers, to be honest with you, on the likelihood of this happening, but merely anecdotally, um, the numbers don't seem to me to add up. That people that I grew up with who went to the same church, lived in the same neighborhood, didn't find them. The sheer number that I had found, in a concentrated period of my life seemed bizarre, that I wasn't looking for them. I would just glance and there'd be one right there that I focused on as soon as I glanced down. And then it's the experience that I attach to it. It's more
John,
than just, I get that warm fuzzy feeling, really.
so
And then pursuing the same phenomenon, like I said, quasi scientifically, when I just kind of,
this isn't
please
scientific.
excuse.
You just acknowledge you haven't done the data. It's all on feel. You haven't run the numbers. That don't pretend that it's
Yep.
scientific, because instead of having an atheist phase, I wish you would have had a skeptic phase, because what you're talking about here is absolutely a bucket load of bias, and without considering the reality of the world that it creates. So, for example, have you ever been incredibly desperate and begged God for a sign?
Um, no.
Okay. Do you think there are people who have been desperate and begged God for a sign, the right God.
Yeah.
Do you think that they all got a sign?
Well, every single one of them, no, but I think that probably what you're saying is
So
that somebody who is looking for a sign is
instead of
going to
in,
assign meaning to something
instead
that's
of
there.
John, stop. Instead of telling me what you think I'm looking for, just let me fucking finish.
Oh, no. Okay.
If not all of these people who in desperation sought a sign from God, that means there are people out there who were desperately seeking a sign from God, who needed it for something important and did not get it. Why would God give you more four-leaf clovers instead of giving them a sign?
I don't know.
I don't either. But since you don't know that God's sending you signs, you haven't run the data. Even if you run the data, even if you found out that you are the most anomalous four-leaf clover collector in the history of the whole world, that wouldn't demonstrate that it's a God sending you a sign. You need to come up with a methodology to demonstrate that the conclusion you prefer is actually the one that is supported by the data. And you don't get to do that by cherry picking how often you find a four-leaf clover while ignoring starving people, children dying of cancer, and their parents desperately flailing around for a God to try to do something. Um, you don't get to just narrow it down to this is kind of weird, because the reality is, even if you're not trolling, even if you found four-leaf clovers left and right, even if you found them at a greater rate than anybody in the history of the world, nothing about that would demonstrate a God or that a God's trying to send you a message. And you deriving comfort from it is entirely about you and what you derive comfort from, because there's no demonstration that a God's trying to provide you comfort at all.
So if I may kind of tag something onto this, I was just looking at chat, um, just looking over there to see what was going on, and I saw at least one person who said that they just looked at the clock and it said 9:11, and I think that's perfectly telling for this conversation that we're having here, right? Because they wouldn't have typed it, they wouldn't have noted that if we hadn't had this conversation, if they hadn't been looking for it. If that hadn't had lit something up in their brain, in the pattern seeking part of their brain, where they're like, oh, that's so weird. We were just talking about that number and now I've seen it. To me, that's a perfect example, right? Exemplary of what I at least think is going on with your four-leaf clovers. Statistically, someone out there is finding more four-leaf clovers or found more four-leaf clovers than anybody on Earth, and I would wager that it's far above the statistical average, right? It doesn't mean that that person is communing with God, and at the same time, like in this situation, and again, like I'm not trying to take away the feelings that you're getting from this. Like you want to interpret that as a spiritual connection, sure, by all means, but I don't find it convincing for that exact reason, for the 9/11 reason that we just saw take place here in chat, which is when you're looking for something, when you're looking for a sign, you see them everywhere.
Still here, yeah. Okay. All right.
John, do you have?
Well,
Can you
I have
think of any
nothing to
way?
argue. I just wanted to share this and see what you guys thought about it.
Okay. Well, what I think is, if you're deriving pleasure from anything you're doing and it's not hurting anybody, I probably don't have much of an objection personally, although I do have an objection um, to believing things without good reason, because I don't believe that the beliefs themselves, nor the heuristics used to arrive at those beliefs, live in a vacuum. I think if you can convince yourself that your prevalence at picking up four-leaf clovers is somehow a message from God, what's to stop you from using that same heuristic to then find all sorts of other things as messages from God? And without going into a clear, slippery slope fallacy, the fact is the heuristic that we use to reach one conclusion is one we use to reach others. And so I'd rather not only do I want to believe as many true things and as few false things as possible, I'd rather not believe anything for bad reason, because that reason is going to get used for something else. And so while I'm happy that you seem to be finding value in it, I have no idea what you mean by spiritual. I have no idea what anybody means by spiritual. And I care about whether or not something's true. So if I found a billion four-leaf clovers, it would not convince me that there was a God trying to send me a message, and I don't know why it would for anybody else. So that's what I think.
I appreciate
You have
that you came
time for
to
another
share
minute?
these thoughts. I think that really, like, you coming here and trying to put that idea to the test. Like, you said you haven't brought this to many people. I appreciate that you brought this here, because to me that speaks of somebody who, to some degree, like, you want to be skeptical, right? You're putting this to the test. You're saying, what will other people find this as convincing as I do? And what I would ask of you, John, is to continue with that mindset. I would ask you to take that mindset that you've brought to that caused you to call the line and have this conversation with us here today, and really keep that in the back of your mind when you're kind of like interpreting the world around you, whether it be with these clovers or otherwise. I think that that's a good thing.
Yeah, the real point is that this experience had a certain quality that I discovered, and that I learned to find other places. It's one unique quality
What,
that when
which
I
experience
learned
and
to
what's the quality?
identify it and look for it. Sorry?
The experience of finding a four-leaf clover had a quality. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, it had an experiential quality to it.
Can you describe that quality?
Unfortunately, no. It's ineluctable, unfortunately.
I don't know what to do with that.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, I think
It's
a lot of people have qualities that are difficult to describe. Like, sometimes when the fall rolls around and I'm walking around outside, I can smell the air just right, and it takes me right back to being in elementary school, getting ready to go to school in the fall, right? But that doesn't mean that that's a sign. That just means that there's some connection that my brain makes to that other people's brains won't make. And I think that, given what you've told us here, especially about your relationship with clovers in the past, I think that it's perfectly reasonable to at least consider that your relationship with these clovers is because you went to a church that put a particular significance on four-leaf clovers,
Well,
right?
it's not really about the clovers, really. It's about the discovery of a quality that, when I investigate that quality where I find it in life, it leads to good experiences.
I
But I
don't
thought
know.
part of the argument was that it was four-leaf clovers were significant to you in particular because they had this direct through line to the church that you grew. I thought that was part of the
Yeah,
argument.
it is. Yeah, but that's where I discovered this positive quality, this
I don't
experiential
understand how you can
positive
keep
quality.
talking about a positive quality that you can't describe, and then say, when you go looking for this quality elsewhere in the world. Well, I mean, there are songs that make me cry pretty much every time. And specific performances, not, a specific recording, not just the song itself. There are pieces of art that I might find almost overwhelming, and others that I'm bored by. There are experiences, whether communal experiences in religious settings or in secular settings, where I will feel goosebumps and elation. Um, there's a way to say that the euphoric, orgasmic feeling that can be attributed to sex, but can also be attributed to some drugs. I can find those qualities of experience out there somewhere, but I can also talk about what it is. I don't know how you can go looking for an experience and have such a significant connection to a quality of an experience and not be able to describe it. Uh, you know,
Yeah,
it, it,
I mean, I would say maybe it's like peace, or I don't know. It's not really a sensory quality.
but at the end of the day, however you describe it, does having that quality of experience in any way demonstrate that it's coming from a God?
No.
There's a writer named Robert Wright who he has a book called Why Buddhism is True, and I find it to be a very interesting text because he's not arguing for a spiritual Buddhism, but rather it's a very clickbaity title to talk about the benefits of meditation and how he finds all these benefits from meditation helps him center himself, like whatever. Like he's a pretty secular individual. But I find it really interesting as a read because he describes specifically the direct similarities between his experience in meditating and the experience that like actual Buddhists talk or the other religious folks who meditate talk about when they meditate and directly attribute to spirituality. So what the reason I'm bringing this up is because I do think it's possible for people to have the very same feeling, or at least something that exhibits the same sort of almost ethereal qualities that we perceive, what we perceive as that at least. And one person can experience them and say, well, that simply must be spiritual. And somebody else can look at them and say, well, no, I think that's a perfectly secular experience feeling that I'm getting because of, very explainable reasons. So I don't think it's unfair for Matt to kind of ask here, why you can't describe that feeling. Because I feel like other people have been capable of delving into like, oh, well, it's spiritual because it connects me with XYZ, or it reminds me of ABC or whatever. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. I mean, I don't really have any point to argue here, or I mean, I just I didn't want to like change your guys' minds or be shaken of this belief, but I just wanted to talk about it and see what you guys had to say. And I remain rational, employed. I'm not a crazy person or anything like that. I just had this episode in my life that brought me to a new type of awareness. It has had good consequences the more I invest in it. So I just wanted to, say that out
What does it
loud and
make you aware
bounce it off
of?
with somebody. Yeah, I know. I mean, that's the weird thing. Is just like I feel like I'm tuned in to something that is that something's out there. I guess it tuned me into a faith. Faith in what? I don't know. A greater sense of purpose or order or something like that.
It seems really strange, and I'm going to let you go after this because we got other callers waiting, but it seems really strange to say that it's made you aware of something, but you also can't describe what that is.
Yeah, some kind of direction maybe. Like I feel like I'm on a path, something, and when I have choices to make, I can feel more strongly connected to one of them versus the others. It just reminds me of that particular quality. Yeah, it's like I haven't really developed this thought very well. It's just something that I experience.
Okay.
Yeah, happy Sunday, guys. Thanks for taking the call.
Okay.
No problem,
Thanks.
John. Thanks for sharing with us.
All right,
It's
happy Memorial Day.
you too. Yeah, it's Memorial Day in the United States. It's Memorial Day weekend, and that's in memory of the people who fought and died in various wars. Um, while I've got 8 years in the military, I obviously didn't die, and I'm really, really, really happy about that.
We're happy
It's a
too,
very,
Matt. We're glad to have you.
it's, it's a very good thing to not be dead. I understand why some people might want that to be the case forever, that they never die. I understand the appeal of it. I just don't understand uh, why anyone thinks it's actual.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, there's definitely a huge difference between this is my personal like perspective on it, but there's a very big difference between someone who's like, yeah, I understand that there's not a rational reason to believe this thing that I believe, but it gives me comfort, whatever. That there's a leap and bound between that and someone who's like, no, my thing is provable, and not just that, it's evident, it's obviously evident, and you're kind of an idiot for not agreeing with me. Very, very different ways of looking at things. I have gripes with both for different reasons, I think.
Yeah, it's it's like one of those things. I can see how and why somebody gets from A to B, but when I'm having a conversation with somebody and we're at this point of there's an ineffable quality. Cool. I can appreciate that there are things that we aren't very good at describing or understanding, but I don't know what quality of an experience there could be that could get me to look for that experience elsewhere, spend time thinking about that experience and what it's doing in my life, especially if we're talking about something as possibly as mundane as finding four-leaf clovers at a higher rate. But there's, it seems like not only are you correct in pointing out that we're the best at pattern recognition, um,
To
we
my
seem
understanding,
to,
it's not even
yeah,
close. Yeah.
we seem to also, in the same way that we seek patterns, we also see agency and see intent, even where there isn't any, because that's the difference between a type 1 and a type 2 error. Um, it would be better for us to err on the side of that leaf, that the branch over there is rustling because there's something dangerous there. If we're wrong, it's not going to cause us anything. Or sorry, if we're wrong and there's no creature there, it's not going to cost anything. But if we assume that, oh, it's just the wind and it turns out to be something that kills us, then that's a much more serious error. And
It's a
we,
Smilodon's wager.
yeah. And then we couple it with looking for meaning. Why am I finding more four-leaf clovers than usual? Why do I feel this way? Why does this quality of experience seem to bring me peace that lets me make a better decision? I don't know. First of all, I don't know whether or not it does. I don't know what the why is. And I would be fine if I got calls every week from somebody that's like, weird stuff's been happening. I kind of wonder if it's a message from the universe, from the stars, from the gods, from the another realm, whatever else. My answer would be the same every time. I have no idea. I don't see any good reason to think it is, but I have no idea. But I keep hearing from people who are like, and this I'm going to decide, rather than saying I don't know or just running with it, it's probably a god, it's probably this. I'm going to try to create a religion. I'm going to try to make this an important part of my life. And I'm like, if there's a god and he's got an important message for us, why the fuck would he ever just make you find more clovers? That doesn't seem like an efficient way to communicate anything. Why would he give you experiences with qualities that you can't describe to people? Is the purpose to not share this information, for everybody to find this cool thing?
Yeah, I mean, like a couple thoughts on that, right? Like the end of that call kind of reminded me of like when I've talked to people who have like tripped on, like, done pretty crazy acid trips, right? And they're like, "Ah, man, like it was this crazy quality, and it opened my mind's eye." And what I'm like, "Hey, man, good for you. That's not for me. Like that's great that it works for you, awesome. But that experience doesn't translate very well. But we're both okay with just saying, okay, the experience doesn't translate very well. They had a weird acid trip, like that's fine." Again, like you said, there's a difference when you assign agency to it. And I think a really good example of the sort of lethal cocktail that you talked about a minute ago of pattern recognition and human curiosity, which is where it's like, okay, well, we're curious and we like to see, like, we like to anthropomorphize everything around us. We've been doing it since the dawn of time. It's why all of our deities are like deities of aspects of nature or half animal or whatever. We like doing that. And it helps us understand the world around us, and has for a very long time until we've sort of been able to divorce ourselves from that. You see that all
Yeah.
the time with like the prevalency of engineers being intelligent design advocates, right? Because they're engineers, so they do nothing but study human design. And then when they look at biology, their brain is trained on the pattern of recognizing design. And so they see it everywhere. They see it absolutely everywhere. And I think that sucks because they're nature designs all the time. You see these wonderful geometric crystals that seem to be, almost palace-like in structure. You see natural arches that form. No one made those arches. No one made those crystals, and yet they appear designed all the same. So I think it's a grave error that's unfortunately very easy for a lot of us to make. You don't have, it's not. You're not a dummy if you fall into that trap, but it's always worth a second look. You got to check yourself on that kind of thing.
Hello, I'm Jimmy Snow, Pokemon Master and Executive Producer on The Line. Would you like to support a specific show on The Line or The Line in general? There are special tiers on our Patreon and in our channel memberships. You can do just that. By the way, you could consider leaving a super thanks down below. You could also like, subscribe, and leave a regular comment. All of these are great. Now, I'm going to get back to crushing loneliness, but while I do that, why don't you check out one of these?